Jonathan Karl, it's been a while since you first released Front Row at the Trump Show, and you say you keep going back to a conversation you had with President Trump in 2019, where you were saying that people take your words to heart, and that could have dangerous ramifications. Since January the 6th, you say you keep going back. Your thoughts keep going back to that conversation you had with Donald Trump.
I was haunted by those remarks as I watched what was taking place on January 6th at the Capitol. This was a conversation, Joe, that I had in the Oval Office with the president. It was right after the shootings in 2019 in El Paso and in Dayton, the mass shootings. And I, talked to him about the rhetoric he was using, particularly about journalists, talking about journalists as the enemies of the people, as disgusting, horrible people who make things up. And I said, aren't you worried? You should be worried that some sick person could take your words to heart. And his response was just as you said. He said, I hope people take my words to heart. It was as if he didn't compute the notion. I don't think that he literally wanted people to act on that. I mean, if you were talking about a class of people as enemies of the people, and you take those words to heart, you are going to do horrible things. Just as when you say the election is being stolen, if people really take those words to heart, our country is going to end if this happens, if Joe Biden is certified. Those were the things he was saying. And people very much did take his words to heart. And I thought of those words he told me. I hope they do.
Oh. And, of course, the Proud Boys heard the president in the final debate telling them to stand back and stand by. I'm curious whether you could have ever have fathomed when you were writing that book, when you were offering that warning, what ultimately happened on January 6th, that you would have a group of rioters go into the United States Capitol, try to stop the counting of electoral votes that would end up being against Joe Biden, vote to throw out tens of millions of votes of primarily black voters, and then, of course, have Donald Trump gleefully looking at the television, wondering why others inside his office weren't excited by the riots that were going on at the Capitol. Can you have ever imagined that moment would actually come to pass?
I thought a lot, Joe, and I know you have. You had over time of what Donald Trump would do if he lost that election, and if he would really concede and essentially hand over the keys to the White House to whoever beat him. In fact, I had a conversation with his former chief of staff, John Kelly, as I was finishing up the book, and I asked him what will happen if Donald Trump refuses to concede, refuses to acknowledge the results of this election. This is far in advance of the election. And he said to me, look, don't worry, we have people. We have people who will escort him out of the building, and the transition will go forward at noon on January 20th. And then he added this. He said he could chain himself to the Resolute desk, and people will calmly go over and clip the chains and walk him out. But what that conversation didn't anticipate is that he would inspire an entire movement to literally try to stop the certification of the election results by storming the Capitol. And ultimately, there were a lot of good people that failed to go along with it. A lot of people that supported him who wouldn't let it happen. I mean, at the top of the list on that day, on January 6th anyway, of course, Mike Pence. Going through and doing basically what he had to do with what he had to do. This is his constitutional duty. He had no other option. But he could have provoked a crisis if he had done what the president was demanding of him and urging his supporters to demand of him.
Yeah, and Peter Baker, as we look back on that time, talking about Jonathan's book, I can't help but think back to the moment when Dick Cheney found it necessary to get other Secretary of Defenses together and send a warning to the Pentagon leadership that they were to stay out of politics. I think at that moment, that's when it became very clear that people like Dick Cheney and other secretaries of defense in both the Republican and the Democratic Party knew that something significant was going on.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And to Jonathan's point, I mean, I talked to a Republican senator just yesterday who was remembering just how frightening the situation was after January 6th, the fear that, in fact, even then, he might not physically leave office, that there might even at that late date be an effort on his part to refuse to give up power, whether that was justified or not. That was the atmosphere. And I think it's amazing how quickly we've forgotten that, how quickly the tumult of that time has faded a little bit with our memories, and we have gotten back to the kind of normalcy, as Mike Barnicle talked about, without remembering just how extraordinary these events really were.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.